Hello everybody, this is Voltage Development and welcome back to Introduction to Visual Scripting in Unity. So yeah, this is a part 2 to the previous video. Now I know that I said I would be doing the space shooter tutorial in this video, but that's going to be in a later video of course. But I am only making this video because I have learnt stuff about Bolt visual scripting that I did not know when I was making the previous videos. So let's go ahead and, well, I've already got a graph, but it's not really any graph because I haven't actually created any macros. So let's go over to our cube player thing and let's add our component, which is going to be the flow machine. And let's create a new macro first. And in my last video, you saw me do a folder called blueprints, and the only reason is because of Unreal Engine, and Unreal Engine uses blueprints, so I'm very familiar with that. So now let's put in movement because why not? And here we have now created a blueprint or macro called movement, and it's automatically inside of this macro so that we can open up the graph for us to do the visual scripting in. Now, I did not actually explain in this last time, of course, because I didn't actually know until now, but if we actually change the source from macro to embed, it would actually get rid of the macro underneath. So switch again, and of course we need to actually reattach the movement macro to this source macro right here so that we can use that macro to do our visual scripting in. But we can just use an embed, and let's open the graph. Now, we did not actually create a macro for this. It's just embedded into this sort of like flow machine thing. So what's happening is this script or this graph is kind of belonging to this object only. So let's just say you want to use this graph, like for example, you want to use a script for another object or use a script for multiple objects. You're able to use a script for multiple objects, but you cannot use the same embedded graph for multiple objects. Like if you wanted to have multiple objects do like an embedded graph, you have to do it manually, or you can just like copy and paste from one embedded graph to another. But okay, you know what? I'm going to show you what I mean. I don't need to tell you what I mean. I'm going to show you what I mean. So let's go ahead and do update, and I don't know, let's just do velocity because why not? So set velocity. Now, if I come out of this object and go to like plane, of course we don't actually have any flow machine over here, and if we insert a flow machine as a component on this plane object that we're currently on, and if we go over to embed, it's a brand new graph. It's like an isolated graph. It's like a virtual graph. Like it's playing inside of its own sort of isolated field, and it's got no connection to anything else. But that strictly isn't true. So let's go ahead and go to window and variables, and actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and go over to actually graph inspector instead, and let's just dock the variables over here. Now, the difference between a macro and an embedded graph is that inside of an embedded graph, you're able to like make a new variable name. Let's say player, and inside of this graph variable, let's just change the type from null to game object. You can actually drag your cube player into it. But let's say, for example, if we go over to cube, and And inside of this flow machine, you know what, let's just go back to macro, yes, switch. And now if you do not want to just drag the movement into there, I mean, it's a lot quicker, but if you don't want to drag the movement into there, all you can do is just click on this sort of circle thingy, and yeah, it will just detect your movement right here, and there we go, it's inserted now. Now go to this graph, and we are now inside of our cube graph. So inside of the variables, inside of the graph variables, let's make a new variable and let's call it plane. And let's change the type from null to game object. Now, because we are inside of graph variables and because we are inside of a macro graph, we can't actually drag the plane into our game object. It will not work. It will only work if you make a plane variable inside of object variables and just place it into there. That will work. And also, if you create a scene variable, let's say main camera, just a different game objects to go into the variable, so game object, and let's go for main camera. You can also do that too. So object and scene is it's not really the same thing. So with object variables, you can obviously create a variable, and if you want to do a game object, like a reference to a game object, you're able to place a game object into your variable. Whereas a scene variable, let's go over to plane here, and yeah, I mean, it may not look like it has changed, but it has changed. So the graph right here that you're seeing, that's on the plane object, this graph is corresponding with this graph inspector. So let's just say if we go over to main camera, and we go over to the graph variables, why is there still this one doesn't even have a flow machine, so what is going on? Okay, I think I know what's happening is even though I'm on the main camera object, since I don't have a flow machine on this object, you know what, let's just create a flow machine on this object real quickly. So there we go. You can see the graph inspector has changed. And we can't go into the graph variables because we don't have a macro inside of our macro source yet. But if we went to source, macro, and an embed, then yes, we would have a graph variables available to us. But if we go to scene, our main camera is still there. And if we go over to cube, our main camera is still there. So all of your scene variables will be on the exact same variables tab as every single object inside of the scene. Now, say for example, let's go to scenes. Let's create a brand new scene. Show scene. Let's just call it, I don't know, new scene. Why not? Now let's go to the scene. Yes, save that scene. Now, wait, scene variables. Okay. I was not expecting that to actually appear. But if we go over to main camera, you don't see any scene variables, do you? But if we go back to the sample scene, and if we go over to cube, our main camera scene variable is still here. Now, if we make an application variable, let's just call this, let's just call this app, because we're on the application variable. So app, and let's do this as a string, because why not? And let's do hello world, because, programmers always do hello world, don't they? So now, if we save this scene, and if we go to the new scene, just remember, we are on the sample scene at the moment, but if we go into the new scene, and if we go into, let's say, main camera, the app variable with hello world is still here, because, as it says here, these variables are shared across scenes, and because we just changed the scene, the variable is still here. But let's say, for example, you counted up to 100 every time you change the scene, yeah? If you quit your application, if you quit the game, then that number will be back to 0 once you restart the game. Now, saved variables, it's kind of like player prefs, and just realizing I haven't even made a video about player prefs yet in C# coding. I might do that in a future video, but yeah, player prefs is a way to save your data once your game is closed and you reopen it, your data will still be there. So let's say, for example, well, I can't really do like an example because the saved variables will be here no matter what I do because it's saved throughout the entire game. So that is all you need to know about variables and the embed graph. Now, in my previous video, I did actually make a tweak to explain to you about the embedded graph and how it's recommended for GUI use. Now, if you are not aware of GUI, it means graphical user interface, like, you know, pressing buttons and just seeing text in your screen. So let's just actually let's go to the sample scene and let's do a button. Where's the button? Button. Oh my Jesus. Right. Let's just yeah, put that into focus and 2D, and you know what? Let's just do scale, and then I don't know, 1920 by 1080 because that's what my game is at. So right now, let's make that bigger. Maybe hang on. Let's just move it first. Oh my god, that is tiny. That is tiny. Why is that so tiny? I don't know why that's so tiny. But anyway, let's make the text also pretty big as well. So there we go. Big text, hell yes. Okay, so now, let's just collapse some of these real quickly so that we can see everything. Now, normally when you're doing C# scripting, you would normally press the plus on this on-click event so that you can pass in like a objects like a cube, and on that cube you would be able to find like a function called play or whatever. But since we're using visual scripting, we can't use on-click. Instead, we have to use another flow machine, and instead of macro, we use embed. Because, actually, you know what, let's just title this, I don't know, random button. Why not? So, I don't know why it says convert, to be fair, but let's now edit the graph. Now, instead of doing on click, you would have to do on button click. So whenever you click on this button, this will fire. So let's just say, I don't know, print a message, and let's just go for a string literal, and let's do hello world. Okay, so let's go to the console now, and let's play our game. So now our game is playing, and let's press the button. Hello world. So let's just see what it does. So yes, we're clicking on the button, and it's constantly printing out the text multiple times. So you would have to do this for every single button you make. If you want to make the button like trigger like a certain event in your, I don't know, pause menu manager or something, then you would need to have something called a trigger. Wait, is it event trigger? Wait, no, it's not event trigger, is it? No. Trigger custom event. So let's just call this, I don't know, resume game or something. So at the moment, I don't actually have any custom events available yet, but because we have this custom event trigger, whenever you click on that button, it will actually send this trigger to the flow graph that the game object has. So, for example, if I had a game object, called it pause menu manager, and let's go and create a flow machine on here, and let's just make a new macro and call it pause menu manager, and let's title it as pause manager. Technically, like, you don't really need to title these, but it's very, very helpful to title these flow machines so that you know which one's which. So let's edit this graph, and well, it's already in the graph actually, and let's go ahead and make a custom event. So custom event, and let's call it, you know what, resume game. So resume game, and now the arguments, you could put arguments, but I don't need any arguments at the moment. So we are going to do print another piece of text, and we're going to do literal again, so string literal, and inside of here we're going to say pressed. Okay, so let's just save that real quickly, and inside of the button text, inside of the button graph, just remember, on button click, when we click on that button, it will trigger this, although we need to actually, hang on a minute, I think we need to get like a reference to that pause menu manager, so we need to quickly, where's my variables, there we go, variables. So, object, let's just get the pause menu manager, and let's make it game object. Let's put the pause menu manager into there, and let's bring this out so that we have a reference to it. Now, put that up to self so that the resume game event trigger is going toward that pause menu manager. So once we have clicked on it, in the pause menu manager, this will fire. So let's go ahead and see if this actually works, shall we? So inside of the button graph, let's click on the button. So it will trigger that event. And now let's go over to the pause menu manager, and let's see if this flows as well. And it does. And here we go, pressed. So that's how you do custom event triggers. Now, if you've been working in C# for a long time, then, and in Unity as well, of course, if you've seen public voids where you can trigger those methods from other scripts, this is technically the same thing as public voids, although when you're doing these custom events, they're technically always public. Like, there is no sort of private methods, private voids in this, unless there are. I don't actually know for sure, but all I know is that these methods, these events, are always going to be public unless you don't reference them or something. But yes, this tutorial, this video was just about making things clearer on the embed graphs and the variables in the flow graph. If any of you do have questions about this, please do let me know, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. But for now, the next video will be like a quick tutorial on how to do player movement properly, rather than what I did in the first video. And then the next video after that will be the space shooter tutorial. So thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I will see you guys soon. Goodbye, everybody.